Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another Raise Game Fully video. My name is Jim. As many of you may know, I'm running a 2nd edition AD&D Planescape campaign with my two sons and their friends. The other day, I was looking through my materials trying to come up with some adventure ideas or maybe a campaign extension to use, and I came across this really great section of a published adventure that refers to the City of Glass. The City of Glass is a small part of an older published adventure called The Vortex of Madness, which I am lucky enough to have in print. The Vortex of Madness is a compilation of 5 or 6 short adventures for high-level characters, written by Chris Pramis, or Pramis. Sorry about your name, Chris, if I didn't pronounce it correctly. And although my characters aren't high-level, I was thinking about one of the adventures in the product that might be a great staging area for planar adventures in the Inner Planes. And I realized that many of you out there probably have never heard of the City of Glass, and I thought it would be a great subject for a video today. The Vortex of Madness published adventure came out in the year 2000, right around the same time that the Planescape rules were becoming popular. And there's a great foreword written here by the author that I want to share with everybody. And in here he writes, adventuring across the planes has been a staple of fantasy gaming since the first edition of the AD&D rules. It began with the World of Greyhawk Adventures and the multiverse appendix presented in the original player's handbook, where warriors braved Balors and other fearsome fiends from the abyss. These other realms were further detailed in Manual of the Planes and later expanded on with the Planescape campaign setting. The Vortex of Madness returns to the roots of planar adventuring. While these sites fit into a Planescape campaign, a copy of that set isn't necessary. Rather, they're intended for the DM looking for a change of pace and for players ready for the next stage in adventure, the Planes, home to gods, demons, and the spirits of the dead. I find this really interesting because Planescape really opened up the doors of people's minds to explore the planes in detail. It fleshed out a lot of the locations and personalities of the planes, and it was really interesting that in the middle of this explosion of material that somebody would publish an adventure to harken back to the old days of quick in and out planar adventures. The adventures in the Vortex of Madness are cool in their own right. I'm not going to go into the other ones. If there's a lot of interest in this video, perhaps in a future video, I can explain the other adventures. They're well thought out, but relatively short. I think they're each approximately 12 to 15 pages of this book for each of the adventures. The last part of the book that deals with the City of Glass takes up 30 pages. And it's a mini setting in its own right, and it's just a wonderful place to stage adventures, both on the elemental plane of water and in the inner planes. All right, so first let me give you a quick overview of what the City of Glass is. The City of Glass is located on the elemental plane of water. And unlike what most people think of when they think of the elemental planes, the plane is not just 100% water everywhere you go. It's described in this book very nicely in that instead of a glass of water, the elemental plane of water is more of a stew, where it's mostly water, but there are other elements kind of floating around in it here and there. And the City of Glass is one of those chunks of elemental matter floating around. What it is a chunk of ice floating in the water, covered by a dome. And inside the dome is breathable air. There's all kinds of speculations as to where the dome came from, how long it's been there. Some races believe it was created by their gods. Others have speculated that it was a type of jail or prison to imprison water-breathing creatures in an air-filled environment. Regardless of how the City of Glass got there, it's there. And it was discovered a long time ago by water genies, or Marids, and they established it as a chunk of their empire, and has been ruled by the Marids for a very long time. The ice that the city is built upon is called eternal ice, which means that no matter what temperature it reaches or if it's exposed to heat or flame, the ice will never melt. It's permanent ice. So the Marids moved in, they kind of paved the ice with crushed coral and crushed shells to to make it more homey and to give it a little bit of a more warm feel. The dome that surrounds the City of Glass prevents teleportation and ethereal travel. So there are portals that open up underneath the city, either in the caverns in the iceberg or in the ocean just outside the city, and they are well known and well traveled. The city currently is home to many, many different species, and as species have moved there over the years, they've set up districts within the city. And those districts are presented on this map here. This, of course, is both a top view and a side view of the City of Glass. And I'm going to take a few minutes and just describe each of the districts to you. Hopefully this will be a site that you can use in your campaigns to bring travelers to and launch them on other adventures. Just a quick mention of history, what's been happening in the City of Glass. The Marids technically aren't in control of the city anymore. There's a very, very famous story of a half-elf, half-dragon by the name of Jalal, who made a bet with the ruling Marid of the city. And he made a bet with the genie that if he could make the sunshine in the City of Glass, that the genies should hand over the day-to-day running of the city to the merchants that had settled there. And of course, Jalal disappeared for a while and came back and opened a portal to the Plane of Radiance and flew through the portal with his gold dragon friend, and sun did shine in the City of Glass. And from that day forward, the Marids no longer rule the city, but they've relinquished day-to-day control of the city to the different merchant groups that are present in the city. They make up a council, and they meet regularly to discuss policy, but it's more of a gang war type of situation. The various races and their districts and the districts they live in are at a very uneasy state of truce. It's all based on merchant profit, who has more profit, who has more voices in the council, and it's a very back and forth situation with a lot of politicking involved. Now, if the City of Glass is someplace that you want to send your parties, you have to be aware that there are different regional effects on magic in the elemental plane of water than there might be in other places. And I've brought up a chart here to summarize those planar effects for you. As you can see, conjuration spells are altered, elemental spells are altered, as are invocation, evocation spells. And it talks about spell keys and power keys for magic user and clerical magic. The City of Glass is an exceptionally cool place to go, and it's a great launching off point if you want to send your characters to some other part of the inner planes. All right, so let me just get into a really quick description of the 12 districts of the City of Glass. They're each populated by a different race, and they each have different features and encounters if you wander in there. They are listed alphabetically. The first one is the Ale District. This is home to dwarves and gnomes. They specialize in brewing, gemcraft, and mining. The merchant house that's in charge of the Ale District is House Silverpick. And the districts have both an official watch, which is sanctioned by the city council, by the government, but there's also gangs that operate within each district. And the watch captain, the watches are run by a captain. They tend to be legit police type people. They watch out for the merchant house's interests. They guard the council members to and from the council, whereas the gangs are more maintaining order and protecting their turf inside the district. The gang in the Ale District is referred to as the Hatchets, and they are usually a bunch of younger dwarves who are very, very protective of trade secrets for brewing and mining and keeping non-dwarves out of their area in after hours, and especially places that don't belong. The second district of the city is called Eleazar. This is the home of the Marids and their servants, the Jan. The Marids, even though the Marids gave up the right to run the city, they still maintain their presence there. They still operate out of the palace. They still maintain their contacts with the rest of the Marid Empire, and it is still an outpost for the Marids to come to and live. They don't operate any businesses. They do operate a trading house, House Al-Rahad. The watch captain, General Al-Akbar, is also involved in many, many other things in terms of policing the city. He's kind of the unofficial military leader of the city in terms of defense of the city. And as a result, there are no gangs in this district of the city operated by the Jan or the Marids. The Marids running the district belong to House Al-Rahad, and even though they're not a merchant house per se, they are in charge of a great number of trading ventures to and from the Prime Plane. And this is their strength, this is their power. By controlling these trades in and out of the Prime Plane, they have access to a lot more raw materials than some of the other houses do. And they have a pretty big trade empire going, even though it seems as though the Marids do very little on a day-to-day basis. The berg itself, the iceberg itself that the City of Glass rests on, is another district, and it's inhabited by the merfolk. The merfolk have the very unglamorous job of cleaning the city and disposing of waste and trash. They don't live in the city because they can't breathe the air. They kind of operate under the city in pools, and they are exiting the city all the time. The mermen do have a counselor. His name is Malafon, and he belongs to House Elsinore. He's the only merman that lives in the City of Glass, and he's attended to by genies and Jan. He makes most of his money by trading seafood that the merfolk can catch because they're leaving the city every day, and they're operating outside of the city, either underneath it or outside of it, and they're able to harvest a quite amount of seafood, and that's the major business that the merfolk are in. The merfolk do have a gang, but they're not present in the city. They're called the Bloody Fist, and they are essentially rebels who are very displeased with the merfolk, with their role in the society of the City of Glass. And they stage raids occasionally into the city, around the city, disrupting fishing trips that the mermen are doing. And the Bloody Fist are trying to speak for the merfolk and get them to rise up above their position of trash sanitation. Another district on the City of Glass is the Central District, so named because it's centrally located in the city and kind of borders most of the other districts. The Central District is inhabited by humans, and the humans make their money by transporting goods and people around the city, and they also have the largest number of inns and taverns in the city, so lodging and tourism is a big profit maker for them. They are led by House Andromeda, in particular the Counselor Eleni Andromeda, and they have a gang called the Teamsters. And the Teamsters are just an old-fashioned gang of humans who want to make sure that everyone's paying fair prices, everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that nobody's encroaching on their business. There's also the Coral District, which is inhabited by the Sea Elves. The Sea Elves are led by House Meladrill, and the Sea Elves have been in the city just about longer than anybody, and they've established trade connections with Sea Elves across the multiverse. And they have a very extensive network, and they basically work in anything they can get their hands on, whether it's salvage or whether it's treasure or secondhand items. And the Sea Elves are very rich and powerful in the City of Glass. Their house is guarded by their watchmen, who aren't terribly notable. What is really notable is the street gang that operates in the Coral District. They're called the Steel Cross Duelists, and they're a group of elves that have mastered the rapier. Because Sea Elves typically don't use melee weapons out in the ocean, they've really had to adjust and adapt to life within a city. And they've picked up a human weapon, a sword, but they've developed a taste for the skill and precision of a rapier instead of something that they consider crude like a broadsword. So there's a whole gang of street elves that patrol the Coral District with rapiers. And it conjures up images of Three Musketeers. They all wear steel crosses on their tunics, and it's just a really cool group of individuals in the city. I will point out in the Coral District one of the keyed encounters on the map. It's called the Wandering Minstrel. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a restaurant dedicated to serving fine delicacies of the sea. It's very prestigious. It's very overpriced. Some of the things here talk about sea dragon omelets and steamed kraken. It's a must-see if you go to the City of Glass. Another district in the city is called the Deeps, and the Deeps are inhabited by the Koatoa. And these fishmen are pretty much just there for bounty hunting. They sell themselves out as bodyguards or to travel the plains in search of bounties that need to be cashed in on. There is a guard, there is a counselor, they do sit in the council. Their trade house is primarily concerned with hiring out the bounty hunters, and they're kind of a professional hitmen. The structures of the deeps are primarily pyramids, akin to like Aztec-style pyramids, partially submerged in water, partially above with air. And the Kuo-toa reside here. Very, very religious creatures, since their deity dwells on the elemental plane of water. There are it's very, very common to see priests and shamans here. Their gang operates in the deeps is called the Net. And the Net is notorious for operating slave rings. They don't take slaves from the citizens of the City of Glass. They take them from other places, but they do operate a ring of slaves in and out of the city. In the center of the city, there is Ice Lake. And Ice Lake is where the Nixies live. The Nixies are primarily agriculturalists. They grow different types of coral and seaweed for trade or for consumption. They also have tours of the lake. They've got water-breathing kelp that they can give to air-breathing visitors, and they can come down and tour the Nixies' domain. They don't have a gang because there's really not a whole lot of criminal activity that happens here that they need to guard against. Their watch is adequate in that respect. Their trading house is called House Aquar. One really, really cool thing that exists in Ice Lake is a spider silk farm. They have, the Nixies have built burrows for giant water spiders to produce silk, and they harvest it and they sell it. And that's one of the commodities that the Nixies can trade. There's also the Jewelers District in the city. That's operated by halflings. House Sharp Eye. They deal in jewelry, obviously. The part of the city is called Drake's End. This is where the half-dragons and humans live. This is where the family of Jalal settled when he brought the Day of Sunshine to the City of Glass. And when the marriage turned over rulership of the city to him, they basically said, okay, here you go, do whatever you want. And it dawned on him that, wow, he really needed to institute some regulations and some laws and try to maintain order among all these merchant houses as best he can. So Jalal brought his family of half-dragons and full dragons to the city to institute a justice system. And they created courts and a legal system to try criminals. A lot of those institutions exist in Drake's End. I thought it was interesting, reading some of the background material on the half-dragons. It seemed like it was a precursor to the Dragonborn race that exists in later editions of D&D. This may have been the start of that, which is super, super interesting. The house that Jalal founded is still in existence. It's called House Jalal, and their commodity is legal advice and counseling. So there's not really a merchant house per se. They're just kind of lawyers and judges and court procedures that they are experts in. There is no gang in Drake's End. The law and order is maintained by their counselor and their city watch. This brings us to law in the City of Glass, and there's an insert here that I'm going to put up on the screen for you. The City Council has enacted many laws over the years, and this little blurb talks about them. It's mostly talks about obtaining licenses and making money, and everybody seems to know that the purpose of the City of Glass is trade and travelers and assisting people getting from one place to another. So obviously theft and destruction of property are very, very big deals, and those are some of the most heinous crimes that can occur in the City of Glass. The City Watch will arrest people, punishments will be handed out, but very, very often the gangs will take care of problems vigilante style. Okay, the next part of the City of Glass is probably my favorite. It's called Reverie, and it is run by a cloud giant called Dolomite. Dolomite is also a counselor on the City Council, and what Dolomite has done was he arrived in the City of Glass a long time ago, and he levitated a palace on a cloud above the lake in the center of the city. And he operates an elevator up from the city itself to Reverie, the city palace complex that is up on the cloud. Dolomite is a fascinating character. Here's a picture of him and his wife Bella, who's also a cloud giant. They are basically mob bosses, and they run Reverie to cater to everybody's whim, desire. There's gambling, there's drug trade, there's prostitution. There's all kinds of crazy, crazy stuff going on in Reverie, but he makes a ton of money. His cloud home is probably the most popular attraction in the City of Glass, especially to humanoids. A big secret inside the Cloud Palace has to do with Dolomite's Nereids. Nereids are elemental water creatures that can resemble human females, and he uses them as prostitutes, and he uses them for escort services. But what nobody knows is that they're technically slaves, and they've been imprisoned under threat of death. Dolomite has taken their shawls away from them. If you remember the description of the Nereids from the Monster Manual, if a Nereid's shawl is destroyed, it dies. So Dolomite is basically holding these Nereids hostage for their services, which is a great adventure hook there. The next area of the city is called Sharktooth, and this is where the Sahaugen live. I'm not sure if anybody else pronounces it that way. The Sahaugen, or the Sharkmen, live in submerged parts of the city. There's water-flooded tunnels. They are hunters, and they will take forays out into the ocean around the City of Glass and bring their kills back to sell as meat, for example. When the Sharkmen were first brought to the city, it was under the Marids' control. The Marids would import them as slaves, and because they were very, very warlike, they would have the Sharkmen duel in the arena in the Colosseum for pleasure, as entertainment value, to have fights to the death, since that's part of their culture anyway. But that tradition has stayed. There's still a Colosseum, there is still gladiatorial combat that happens, and the Sharkmen technically now are part of the city. They have a seat on the council, but they are distrusted by other members of the city, which can lead to some great role-playing encounters. Their gang is called the Sea Devils, and the Sea Devils are always just skirting the edge of the law. They're always getting in trouble. They're always murdering each other. It's a very, very dangerous place to exist. The last section of the city is called Wormtown. This is where Ormir live. Ormir, if you're unfamiliar with them, are worm-like creatures. They dwell under the city, inside the burg. They're very, very large. They're about 25 feet long. And it's probably the largest community of Ormir in the Inner Planes. They came to the City of Glass recently looking for magic items, and that's what they've been doing. They establish a merchant trade for magic items. And one of the locations keyed on the map, which is site number 29, is a great place to mention. It's called Crazy Croakers. It's a very successful magic shop. They both buy, trade, sell, and I'm not sure in your campaigns if you have magic item shops like this. In older D&D, they were very, very rare or non-existent at all, and I've only put them in my campaigns in a handful of times. But this is a great addition to any campaign. You'd have to travel to the City of Glass to maybe meet this famous magic dealer, see his wares, and exchange things with him. Croaker is himself an Ormir. He has a human wizard as his assistant, so the two of them are able to discern the nature of magic items very, very quickly. He doesn't maintain them on site. He keeps his supply locked up somewhere else. He'll retrieve monies or retrieve items for you. That's a quick overview of the districts. The book goes into great detail of all the personalities involved. I didn't want to get into it in my short video. One last thing I do want to talk about is Selkie Week. Selkies are a type of water fairy that resembles a seal. 1 week out of the month, Selkies are able to transform into a human. And for the most part, most of the Selkie population assumes human form at the same time, and they tend to descend on the City of Glass in large numbers, overwhelming the taverns, just getting into trouble, causing drunken episodes in the streets. And Selkie Week has become its own thing in the City of Glass. There was actually a move to get the Selkies put on the ruling council because they bring so much money into the city, even though it's just once a week. So there technically is a Selkie representative on the council, but as you can imagine, very, very few important decisions are made that 1 week out of the month. The other council members tend to save their important decisions for when the Selkies aren't around because they're so chaotic and so destabilizing. All right, well, that was a really short look at the City of Glass, an elemental plane of water. Feel free to use it in your campaign. It's a great stopping off point if you want to explore the inner planes. It's a great addition to any campaign, and you can populate it however you wish with other species that may not be mentioned in the book, or you might want to just use it as a quick stop for a merchant house or for a vacation to Reverie to interact with the cloud giants that are partying there pretty much all the time. It's a super fun addition to any campaign, and I highly recommend it. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Jim. This is Raise Game Fully, and please remember to be kind to your fellow players.